You smell it before you see it. Astringent, metallic. Beneath it, something rotting, sweet like spoiled meat. The corridor echoes with the squeak of polished leather soles. You run your tongue along the back of your teeth, suddenly aware of them, their roots, their vulnerability. Someone is screaming behind a door that does not open, not because of the pain, but because it is happening again. You pause at the edge of the stairwell and you wonder, what happens to the mind when the body is carved apart to save it? And what kind of man believes he can cure madness by force? This is Trenton State Hospital, New Jersey, 1919. Once called the New Jersey State Lunatic Asylum, the institution now stands proudly under the guidance of a man hailed as a reformer, Dr. Henry Andrews Cotton. His star is rising. He lectures at Princeton. He writes for journals. His name moves through medical circles like gospel. But inside these walls, something else is moving. A cart of extracted teeth rolls past, porcelain bowls brimming with bloody molars and blackened incisors. It wobbles, leaving a thin trail of red along the cracked tile floor. Dr. Cotton believes in the focal infection theory, not a metaphor, but a literal map of disease. He is convinced that insanity is not a disease of the mind at all, but of the mouth, the gut, the bowels. He believes that hidden bacterial infections lodge in the body and poison the brain. A rotten tooth may birth a delusion. An inflamed tonsil could spark hallucinations. And if you cut out the rot, you save the soul. This belief is not uniquely his. The early 20th century is an era of crude certainties. Pasteur's germ theory has conquered minds, but antibiotics are still 2 decades away. Surgery is bold, brutal, and often fatal. Hospitals become battlegrounds for ideas, and in Trenton, Cotton builds his empire on extraction. He begins with teeth, dozens, sometimes all. Then tonsils, sinuses. When those fail, he moves inward. Stomachs, spleens, colons. By 1921, entire sections of patients' intestines are removed in the name of psychiatric relief. Their names fade into hospital logs. Their voices are often never heard again. But Cotton reports miracles. 85% cured, he says. The newspapers reprint it. The von Oxum lectures applaud it. Even the families believe, for a time. After all, what other hope is there for the insane? You walk the wards and see the signs. Stitched bellies, sunken cheeks, mouths gaping with absence, and tucked in many patients' palms, a strange object. A small tooth key. Not a real one, of course. Carved of wood or wax, fingered like a talisman. A symbol of what they've lost or what they've survived. No one can agree. And as the bells toll above, remember, stories like this seldom sleep. If you wish to follow their echoes, leave your mark. Like, subscribe, return. The gates close behind you. Some never reopened again. Her name was Margaret, daughter of the renowned Yale economist Irving Fisher, brilliant, well-bred, artistic. She was not insane, not at first, just troubled, melancholy, her mother said, unsettled. And so, like many daughters of status in 1919, she was sent to rest, to recover, to Trenton. You can still see the ink of her father's pen trembling across a letter. Dr. Cotton doesn't think Anne will suffer. The uterus, like the intestines and other internal organs, has few nerves. The trust is chilling. They extracted her teeth, then her tonsils, then her cervix, then her colon. When the fever came, they called it healing. When the infection spread to her lungs, they said it was temporary. When Margaret died, they said she was too far gone to begin with. Dr. Cotton recorded the death, filed it, moved on. By this time, the surgeries had multiplied. Hundreds of patients, many poor, many institutionalized for decades, submitted to Cotton's cure. Or rather, they were made to. Consent was ambiguous, in some cases irrelevant. The belief was that madness stole the ability to choose, and where choice disappears, the scalpel decides. Historians would later call this era a convergence of two dangerous things: unchecked authority and the seductive certainty of pseudoscience. But not everyone was silent. In 1924, a quiet storm arrived at Trenton in the form of Dr. Phyllis Greenacre, a young psychiatrist and former student of Adolf Meyer, the very man who had once supported Cotton's early work. Her task, to verify Cotton's miracle. What she found was chaos, records missing, diagnoses inconsistent, and the numbers, those beautiful headline-grabbing recovery rates, manipulated. Patients who died were labeled improved before their final breath. Others were discharged in silence, only to die at home from post-operative infections. Greenacre, meticulous and restrained, delivered her report with scientific precision, but underneath the data was a quiet scream. This is not medicine. This is mutilation wrapped in theory. Yet Cotton endured, even when his practices began to draw skepticism, even as mortality statistics climbed, even as whispers circulated through medical halls. He remained in power. His belief in focal infection was absolute. His surgical hand, undeterred. There is a moment when belief becomes doctrine, when evidence is contorted to fit conviction. Dr. Cotton did not slow down. In fact, he subjected his own children to extractions, preventatively. That was how deep his faith ran. And what of Margaret's father? Irving Fisher never publicly condemned the man who helped kill his daughter. Instead, he doubled down, became a supporter of mental hygiene and eugenics, convinced that the fault lay not in the doctor, but in some broader, inherited flaw. And still you wonder, how many others passed through Trenton with quiet names and vanished fates? What ghosts remain unburied beneath the language of cure? They buried Dr. Cotton with honors. He died in 1933, his white coat clean, his name still polished in medical journals. No tribunal, no apology, no reckoning, just silence, like the kind that settles over a room after the screaming stops. But the legacy lived on. For years, the records at Trenton remained sealed. Families were told their loved ones had been treated with the best science of the day. The word surgery appeared, if at all, only in passing. The deaths were natural, the madness incurable, and the tooth key? It returned, found decades later, in a rusted drawer behind a collapsed wall. A crude carving, childlike, one end worn from handling. Someone, at some point, has held it tightly enough to leave a faint impression in the wood. Perhaps it was Margaret's, or someone no one remembers. It became, in the end, the most honest artifact in that institution, not the medical charts, not the lectures. A small token of pain endured and forgotten. Modern psychiatry eventually turned its gaze elsewhere, toward Freud, toward lithium, toward community care. The focal infection theory collapsed. Under better data, better ethics, Cotton was quietly exiled from the canon. His name is not widely taught. But the shape of his harm, how quickly the world embraced it, that remains. Because the mind, we learned, cannot be cut into silence. And sometimes, the most terrifying truths are spoken not in screams, but in calm, clinical hands, holding a scalpel, promising a cure.